Hello, and how are you doing this week? I have a little three-part series that I wanted to do for you. So today is part one. You'll hear the next one in a couple of weeks, and then the one after that, a couple of weeks after that. But what it has to do with is the blue zones. So years ago, when it first became kind of one of those things, if I would talk about the blue zones, I would get this like blank look from people like, what are you talking about? What are the blue zones? But with the advent of the Netflix documentary, this has become front and center. And now I'm like in the dark ages if I don't know what's going on the most recent episodes. I guess they're all out now. But something that came up a lot lately in our group is the idea of nutrition. So nutrition is one of the tenets of the Blue Zone, and we'll talk about all of this today. But we'll talk about, I think it's the 9 of them, but it's come up again and again. And I thought, you know what? Let's just chat about this because it is important. There is, if you haven't read about it or watched the information, basically there is a lot of science behind this. Uh, the author went out and decided to find the places where the people were the most long lived in the world. And so he found, I think it was 5 zones of places where people seem to live the longest. And then they studied those people. Like, what are they doing? What are they doing different than us? And I'm going to give you like a little cheat on episode 3. I'm going to talk about some of the things we can do even when we don't live in a blue zone, because I I definitely don't live in a blue zone. And some ideas on things that you can do. But today I wanted to just like touch on these 9 steps and the things that make a blue zone, make a blue zone possible for all of us. Okay. They're all things that we can do right wherever it is that we live. And then some suggestions. So, in fact, I'll wind up this episode with some suggestions. First thing is that a lot of times people think the blue zones, it's all about food. And food is a big piece. Okay. Food's a big piece, but it's not the only piece. So, one of the first things in blue zones is about movement. Here I am preaching about movement, right? So, the thing about movement is that in the quote unquote blue zones, most every one of those zones have have elevation. Okay. I won't say that they're high up as an elevation like that, but they have ups and downs. They have the kind of movement that really does promote healthy hearts and healthy bodies, because you are like going up and down. Instead of doing what a lot of us do, and do not stop doing what you're doing now, right? Like weightlifting is one of those things that we should be doing. And so don't stop it because they don't necessarily lift weights in the blue zones, but look at, how your movement is. So one of the things that they suggest in most of the blue zones is like gardening, day-to-day activities, like the things that we do day in and day out. And sometimes we don't do them because they become like the walking. Like I know, okay, where I happen to live in this fabulous neighborhood, big trees and big yards and no sidewalk. Traffic comes through here. It is not a comfortable place to walk. So I don't do a lot of walking outside my front door, but I do find the walking in the woods around. So that kind of thing, like, thinking of natural movement, but in addition to that, thinking of movement that like makes your heart race, going up and down stairs, uh, you know, doing the things that matter, carrying stuff, not sitting so much. Like that's one of the things that they don't talk about in the blue zones, but I think is a big deal, is that if you look at, like, let's say rural United States, maybe, I don't know, 50 years ago, I'm not exactly sure how long ago, call it 70 years ago, when there was a lot of gardening, a lot of food coming from gardening, a lot of people who are still living in the country. That kind of lifestyle is the lifestyle that a lot of people live in the blue zones because they're, constantly in motion. So getting up from your computer, moving around, like move naturally, but move frequently. Okay. I think that's one of those takeaways. If you don't live somewhere where you can, you know, chop wood and, and, cut trees, I don't know what it is, but, move often. Another one, and this has, once again, nothing to do with food, is the idea of having purpose in life. And they have different, like in Costa Rica, it's called Plan de Vida. Like, what's the plan for your life? And it's another way of saying it is like why I wake up in the morning. And when we wake up and we have that excitement, that interest, that opportunity to find things that we could do for that day that will be generally things that enrich lives. So, like looking for those kinds of purpose, I think makes a big difference. And purpose can also be caring for other people. It can be, running your business. It can be, reaching out, whatever it is. But having that purpose in life makes a huge difference. And I mean, we saw this, and I'm going to say it during the pandemic. Like we saw this a lot for people who were at home, cloistered, and had nothing, right? Like really, truly no real purpose. They couldn't reach out to other people. They couldn't do the things they normally did. And it was super debilitating, super debilitating. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a couple of other things that we actually understood that came out of the whole idea of the pandemic. But that's one of them, is that when we wake up and we don't have like that excitement for life, it's hard. It takes away from our longevity. Another one that I really like, and once again, this really isn't about the food. It is in a way, but it isn't. It's what they call the 80-20 rule. So their idea of the 80-20 rule in the blue zones is that you stop eating when you're full, not when you're stuffed, right? Like 80%, you're at that 80%, and we've all been there like, oh, I couldn't eat another bite, but oh man, this stuff is so good. I'm going to have another bite, right? It's that stopping at the 80%. This is, I mean, and we'll talk a whole lot about the 80%, 20% in the third episode I do on this, because I think a lot of things in life actually fall really well in that 80-20. But finding that place where you don't overeat, but you eat for health. That's one great place that you can use that 80-20. Another one, and it's not really part of the 80-20, but it does fall under what they suggest, is that not eating your biggest meal at the end of the day. Like that falls into the whole idea of intermittent fasting and, and going to bed without a full stomach and, all the things that we hear about. Not something I do. Okay. I will tell you that typically my biggest meal of the day is the last meal of the day. It's just the way my life works. And so in that instance, I do try not to stuff myself at the end of the day, because if I don't, or if I do stuff myself, I'm very uncomfortable. And, A, it's not healthy. And B, it also leads to poor sleep. So some of the other things is that in that 80-20 also is, if you think about just portion size, okay, portion size in general, and I'm in the United States, so I'll call it out for the States. Portion size in the United States in general, when we go out, is relatively large. Okay. There's a lot of times that we take food home if we've been out to eat, or we eat all the stuff and then we wish we'd taken food home. So thinking about that, like just the whole idea of that 80-20, like how much do you really need to enjoy? Or how much do you really need to eat? You can enjoy without doing it. Another one that I find kind of interesting is they're really big on wine, really big, like obvious. If you read the book, basically they're like, yep, the trick is to drink 1 to 2 glasses of wine a day. Now, if you go to a doctor here in the States and you say that you're drinking 1 to 2 glasses of wine a day, so that's 7 to 14 glasses of wine a week, which what is that, like 28 a month, 28 a month. They will look at you like you need to be checking in to the alcohol rehab. So I don't know. I don't know how I feel about the wine. I think that if it's something that you already do and it's something that you enjoy, then great, enjoy it. Don't drink wine to try and get health benefits out of it, because really, like, people will tell you that it's the resveratrol that's in wine that's good for you. You can't drink enough wine to get the amount of resveratrol out of it that would be good for you. Like, if you want that, take a supplement. Wine's not going to do that for you. But one of the reasons I really believe that wine is suggested is because it's a communal thing. And if you look at, in fact, the rest of what we're going to talk about, it's not about as much food. And we'll touch on food in a second. It's not about as much food as it is about community. It's about having that sense of belonging. And if having wine is one of those things that allows you to be in a community that is exciting and helpful and close for you, then that's probably where it counts. I have a good friend of mine who moved to Spain, and he said, like, what they do, the way they live there is different, much different than here. And so most evenings now, and this is somebody who, like, I don't even think he drank before he went to Spain, but most evenings they go out. That's what they do. They go out, they meet friends, they hang out at an outdoor cafe, and they drink wine. So, and he said, you know what? It's really fun. It's a whole different lifestyle. They stay up late. I don't know what he told me, but he said something, I think, like, often he gets home at 1 a.m. I'm like, 1 a.m. I'm like, I wouldn't even know how to do that. But it works in their environment. So thinking about that, so it's the idea of connection. There's another piece about the connection that, before we even dive into it, that I would like to suggest is that when you belong to a community, there's actually a really good study that came out recently. I think it was, I don't remember what it was in, but it was published just last year. And it showed that people who were socially isolated, individuals who were socially isolated, had a 26% higher risk of death, while prolonged loneliness, like just sheer loneliness, raised people's risk of death by 14%. That's substantial. Like, I don't think there's anything you can eat that makes that big a difference in our longevity, if you think about that. So the next piece of this, the blue zones that I wanted to mention, was just the idea of belonging, like belonging in a community. Now, in the blue zones, the way they talk about belonging is it's all faith-based. They say that, I think the number was like, out of their 263 centurions that they actually interviewed, all but 5 of them were part of some faith-based community. And in episode 3, I'm going to give you my take on that, because I think that, well, I'll give you my take on it right now and then later on too. But I think that what it is that smaller communities, and you'll see this, like, I grew up in the South, so you see this in the South a lot. Smaller communities are all based around the places of worship. That's how the communities usually started. Actually, like, they'd find a place, they thought this was a great place, in comes a church or whatever your religion is, and then that becomes the glue for the community. So does it need to be faith-based? I don't know. But I do know that one of the things that's very interesting is that when you're in groups, like communities, social interaction will boost your brain health. It's like, in our brain, we need to be able to formulate responses. That brain health comes from interacting with people. We need that actually grows neural pathways between brain cells and circuits. So knowing this also helps with lowering the chances of like neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. So knowing that when you belong, whether that's faith-based for you or somebody else, that it keeps us from being lonely. And lonely is something that a lot of people, like I mentioned a minute ago, a lot of people noticed during the pandemic, because I have several friends who said, you know what, I don't think as well as I did. My words don't come as easily. I noticed that, like I have to practice. So my words didn't come as easily. And it's simply because we weren't working on those neural pathways. Another piece of community and belonging is having the right community. Okay. And I think this is part where the faith comes in. So having the right community, like anytime you're part of a community, the habits within the community tend to become your habits. Okay. Not 100%, but mostly. So if you have friends who hang out at bars, I mean, nothing wrong with that, but you have friends who hang out at bars, they enjoy eating whatever the bar food is, and they smoke and they drink a lot, right? That is that's the way the community interacts. So right there, as you can see, like as an extreme example based on, either going to church or hanging out in a bar, it's an extreme example, but it's an example that shows you that we do pick up the habits of the communities that we are within. So having that as a thought process, I think makes a big difference. So another way of saying is, what is the saying? You are the sum total of the 5 people that you hang out with the most. Right here. That's really what we're dealing with. Another piece of the blue zones is that they talk about loved ones first. So this is families first. I know in the United States and probably some of the other countries that people who listen to this in different countries, we have a backlash of the fact that we are a very scattered society. So generally, people move away from, and not always, but generally people move away from their families. And so now they're in different areas and they're not family centric. Whereas in the blue zones, these are people who are not moving away from their families. Okay. These are people who don't get a job in Silicon Valley and go there to live, or whatever it is, right? They're more family focused. So yes, I think that makes a big difference. And yes, in episode 3, I'm going to talk about this a lot, because I think we can debunk that a little bit too, because we talk about the fact that, and actually we have all heard this, like having a life partner, supposedly, if you have a committed life partner, it increases your longevity by a certain number. I think they typically say 3 years. But I think that we're seeing that changes when maybe we don't have a life partner, but we have this kind of community support that gives us what we would get in a life partner. And that leads to actually their third or their 9th piece. And I skipped plants, don't worry, or food, we're going to come back to that. But the 9th piece is basically having the right tribe. And it's a little bit like what I talked about a minute ago, having the kind of people that you're hanging out with that promote the lifestyle you should or would like to have. People, like studies show, when people are obese, generally the people in their community are too. It's more acceptable. And there's some genetic stuff there too, right? But in general, let's just pretend like the genetics are off the table and this is only about community. In general, that's one of the things that happen. In general, people who smoke, it's more acceptable, right, to be in communities where people smoke. So I'm not saying that it's the same for everybody, but it is one of those things that we can look at and just look at our community. How does our community support us? And how do we support our community, right? Like it does matter. So let's talk really quick about food. Food is the piece of the blue zones that we hear the most about. And like it's the tangible, right? It's the tangible piece that we can get our hands on, that we can do, whether we live in Houston, Texas, like me, or the Nicoya Peninsula, like, the blue zone there. We can do it because food is a universal. So one of the things in the blue zone is they talk about a plant slant. Okay. Plant slant is nothing more than getting the majority of your calories from plants, beans, legumes, those kinds of things that grow in the ground, versus meats, and dairy. Okay. And in the plant slant, oils also play a role. Healthy oils, like an olive oil, an avocado oil, coconut oil, those like more, less processed and more plant-based, they play a piece. So a couple of things about, well, actually, I'll come back to that because it is a piece that I'd like everybody to look at. But knowing that a plant slant does matter, okay? And at the same time, you want to make sure that you're enjoying your meals. This is a big piece. Like nobody talks about this, but if you're eating food that you don't enjoy, you're eating it because, by gosh, this is what you're supposed to eat. I don't think it's as healthy for us. I don't think it does as much for us as it could. So find the things that you enjoy. If you have not spent a lot of time cooking vegetables, then my suggestion would be learn it slowly. Like, okay, I have to tell this story because I'm pretty sure nobody in my family, or in Phil's family, listens to the podcast. But the first time we went to his parents' house, his mom was really worried. The vegetarian, that was me. The vegetarian is coming to eat here. What am I going to feed her? What am I going to feed her? So she finally decides on the cabbage rolls. Perfect for a vegetarian. And so I'm eating the cabbage rolls and I'm thinking, this is a different flavor in this cabbage roll, but we're going with it. You eat what's put in front of you, right? And she's like, oh yeah, I'm glad you like them. And I just put a little bacon in there for flavor. And I was like, yep, totally get it though. Because if you're not used to cooking a lot of vegetables, they don't carry the flavors like meats do. So you have to kind of work with it. You definitely have to work with it. And that's going to be like one of the pieces when we talk about like my 3 tips, it's going to be learning to work with those vegetables. So having a plant slant, don't just throw out the meat because it's not in the blue zones, but limit it a little bit more while still, okay, while still figuring out ways to keep your protein intake up. If you've heard me talk about this at all, or heard any of my guests talk about this at all, in general, we need to have our protein a little higher than we think, probably a lot higher than we think. And so meat-based products are one of those things that give you protein. Another from a plant base, lentils. Lentils are like crazy high in protein. Barley. And then of course, the tofus and the tempehs and all of those. So those can be part of it. But just know that you want to balance all this stuff. Lots of vegetables. Can't go wrong with lots of vegetables, but you want them to be tasty enough that you enjoy eating them. All right. So I want to just touch on these again really quick. And then we're going to go to the very end where I want to talk about a couple of suggestions. So one of them, move, move naturally and continue to do your exercises. Okay. Don't stop doing the weights because they don't do those in the blue zones. Our lifestyle is different. Totally different. So have purpose. Like when you wake up in the morning, you want to feel like you've got a reason, right? Like you've got something to be excited about. And that purpose can be different every day. Okay. It doesn't have to be like my purpose in life is, but it can simply be, my purpose today is I'm going to go volunteer at the animal shelter. Or my purpose today for me would be I'm going to be able to, have a call with my women and we're going to all come away from it better than we were when we started. Like, have purpose for yourself. The next one is remember to wind down. They don't talk about this at all in the Blue Zones, but I would say that meditation, relaxation, I mean, they do talk about taking naps, but meditation, relaxation, finding ways to wind down, especially at the end of the day, is super important. Something I've started doing, which is random, but seems to work. I wear a mouth guard. I grind my teeth. I've been grinding my teeth for 40 years. So what I've started doing at night is actually just doing a facial massage. Really simple, just like, just a little facial massage. And I've noticed how interesting it is that I am more relaxed when I go to sleep. So find things that bring you and wind you down, that remove some of the stress, because the stress, that stress is the inflammation ravaging our bodies. Okay. The next one is try not to stuff yourself at meals. Stop eating a little sooner than you think you should. Plant-based foods, just play with it. Okay. Play with it. Wine. If you do drink wine, I would suggest that, what works best for you, but they like the idea of wine. If you are part of a faith-based community, embellish it, embrace it, enjoy it. If you aren't, then find other community that works for you, that makes you feel good, right? I think that's part of this. It's just feeling good about life. Families first, they're right in there. If you don't have like a family, then what you want is that community that is your family. And then coming right down to the last one, which is what they call the right tribe, same thing. It's all about community that works for you. So when we come back, I want to talk about like my 3 suggestions for just bringing a little Blue Zone into your world, wherever you live, and why you should. So, all right, here's my suggestion. And we're going to start small because you can just go wild with this. But pick one of the 9. Okay, pick one of the 9 that we just talked about. In fact, I'll put we'll put the list in the show notes. Pick one that you want to focus on. And once you feel like you're doing pretty good with that one, add another one if you want, right? Like this is a lifetime experiment. It's not going to make the big difference next month. It's going to make the big difference in 10 years. So pick one thing and give it a focus. And then grab a couple of recipes. Okay. There's tons and tons of Blue Zone recipes on the web, or get the book if you want, get one of their cookbooks if you want, whatever you think. Get one of the recipes, get a recipe and play with it a little bit. Remember what I said about vegetables. Vegetables in general require a little bit more seasoning than getting the flavor out of the bacon in the cabbage rolls. So like find some seasoning that works. Like for me, I mean, often my seasonings are ginger, garlic, and then herbs. So, bringing those together and bringing them in a little bit. And then, I have to tell you, like, I always say, like, use some sauces, like learn how to make some sauces. I have a good friend of mine who said to me one day, she was like, Kelly, I actually thought that I always liked vegetables. I thought I really like vegetables. She said, but I really realized when I decided to quit eating cream sauce and everything, it was the cream sauce I liked. So probably less cream sauce, more light and airy sauces. And then another one is like reach out to somebody. Step 3 this week, reach out to somebody. Just reach out to somebody. Maybe it's somebody that you think might need a little pick-me-up. Maybe it's somebody that you've been wanting to talk to. Maybe it's a friend you haven't connected to in a while, but just like reach out, make a little connection. It doesn't have to be like get together and meet in person. It can be like pick up the phone. When was the last time you just picked up the phone and called somebody? I always find that really interesting. I'll do this occasionally. It's just call somebody. They'll be like, yes. Like, did you need something? I'm like, yeah, I didn't want to text you. I wanted to just talk to you on the phone for a couple minutes. And if this isn't a good time, we can talk later. So bring a little bit of this into your world. Know that wherever you're living right now is probably not a blue zone, but you can make it a little blue zone for yourself. Next week or next episode, I'm going to talk about what happens when I take the blue zone quiz, which I was a little shocked by, but I took it and I was a little shocked by results. And then the last episode, I'm going to talk about what are some ways that we can take everyday modern life, and not like if I was living in the Nicoya Peninsula, walking up and down mountains carrying water every day. They don't carry water there, but carrying vegetables. Not that, but how can you bring this in to your world and use some of the modern conveniences and opportunities that we have in the longevity space to help make this work for you. So thank you for being here. Thank you so much for listening. And I will see you next week. Bye-bye.